CJ is interested in your writing process, and especially as a young man, and being just brave enough to get started. You know, you had to start somewhere. You let your wife see it. She made it bleed, and then she said it wasn't very good. So that takes some courage to go back and start over.
You know, what I recommend is that if you have an idea, just start getting it on paper. And no matter, even if it's in the middle of the story, the end of the story, somewhere in between, who cares? Just get that idea on paper. And then what I would do is, if I thought, well, this is in the middle of the story, then I just write, like, before I make a file on that, and I write like 50, and then that's where it'd be. And then if I thought there's something, this will be before that, well, then let's like rate 30. And then, you know, so then you have a number before each of those stories, so you can at least kind of start putting it in order. And then as it develops, you can start to arrange and put things in your different orders. But I think it's super important to do that. Also, if you just have ideas, maybe you have an idea about the book, but it's not actually specific to the story. Maybe you have an idea about a character or something, then just make a file. Name that file with the name of that character and start writing down the traits that character has, what that character looks like, anything about that character that you think might be important. And you just start getting all of that stuff. Oh, now I've got another character. Okay, what that character look like? Sometimes I'll go through the internet and I'll try pictures of people, and I'll try to find a picture of a person that I think it looks kind of like that character, and that helps me to kind of have a visual of that person as well. So all of those things, I think it's really important just getting something on paper, and don't worry about the quality of it at first. Just write, you know, really fast, and then you can come back and start correcting the sentence and start working on the structure, and whether you use this adjective already previously in the sentence, okay, and then you want to change that. Those kind of things you can do later, but at first just at least get something on it. Oh, yeah.
And speaking of when you do that with your characters, you can also then allow them to change. For instance, when the book first started, time was based on me, and now I'm based on an old herb woman.
Well, I made the mistake of telling Tass that Kalka is an old herb woman in the book. There's a lot of characteristics she has that actually do come from Tass.
Wow!
So, yeah, Tass is really enthused about that. Oh, the old herb woman, huh? She inspired you.
I want to ask a favor of this audience. I do not do these projects by myself, although I'm the spokesperson for Backroom. We have a woman that wrote the grants for these things, and she's watching us from Bethesda, Maryland tonight. Her name is Barb Evenson. So at the count of 3, can you say hi, Barb? 1, 2, 3. Hi, Barb!
All right.
She's going to love that. So thank you very much. Also, this is brought to you tonight by the National Endowment for the Arts, the South Dakota Arts Council, and the Rapid City Subsidy for the Arts. So we had a lot of help. Plus, I was just so pleased that we could get Bruce and Tass as part of our program. So let's hear it from them one more time. The books are for sale up here. I hope you had a great time. We will continue doing this, so just watch on the Backroom page or Darla Drew Lairdall page and on Facebook, and I'll get the word out to you somehow, because we're going to keep doing this series, and we'll have another one on the 3rd Thursday of July. So thank you for making time. Thank you for finding parking places, and before I see you next time, read a good book. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Josh. Hey.
Okay.
We're late now.
Okay.
Oh, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Well, hi everybody. I am so glad you found a place to park and made it here tonight, because I know it wasn't easy. For us, this is kind of bittersweet, because this will be our last time at the Cave Collective, because they are changing gears. They're going to stay together in a way and keep operating, but they might be moving their concerts from different places in town. And so we'll just see what happens with them, but definitely the Backroom production will go on with the writer's block. Come on in. Do you want to be at the writer's event?
Sure. ever get across?
I don't think you can. I think you have to go back around now, okay?
Okay.
But this would be really fun for you guys.
We'll be right there.
No, okay, where were you going?
The comedy club.
Oh, okay.
Comedy
over
club.
at 80s.
Yes.
Okay,
Everything's
there's,
happening tonight.
everything's happening tonight. Well, that's good. That's good. You know, Rapid City is a pretty lively place now, so that's really a good thing. By the way, I'm Darla Drew. I am now president of the Backroom Productions group, and that's who's bringing this to you tonight. We were able to get some grants, so we're able to actually pay people to be here and pay people. You know, artists are kind of used to going, well, we might be able to scrape together 25 bucks for you. That's not the case here tonight. So, and I have to thank the South Dakota Arts Council for that, and also the Rapid City Subsidy for the Arts for making this possible for you guys to attend this for free tonight. Usually Bruce and Tass, you know, when you go to see them, usually around here, there's a charge for it, but we were able to present this for free tonight because we got some grants. And so I am so happy to see my friends, Tass and Bruce and Tass here tonight. They have had the most interesting lives. This is from a person that's had an interesting life. They have really, really rocked it. And so usually I do a little interview first, but tonight we're going to do things a little different. They're going to take off tonight with their promotion of Bruce's books. He's writing fiction now, and also Images of the World, give you a little background on how they ended up biking the world and still staying married.
Thanks, Darla. Yeah, and we can just get the lights off too. That'll work. So I want to welcome everybody. My name is Bruce Junek. This is my wife, Tass Thacker. We're world travelers, explorers, adventurers, speakers, teachers, photographers. I'm also an author, a filmmaker, and a mystic.
In 1987, Bruce and I created Images of the World, a series of educational slide programs which we give primarily in schools and often at festivals and community events like this. I need a clicker.
There you go, click away.
Since we have so many different programs, many of the schools have us return every year to see a different program. I do programs at one school while Bruce does programs at another. The only time we do programs together is at community events like this, so tonight you get to hear both sides of the story. Nearly 2 million students have seen our assembly programs.
I've also written 2 travel narratives. The Road of Dreams is the story of our 26-month around-the-world bicycle trip. Andes to the Amazon is the story of 7 journeys that Tass and I have done through Mexico, Central, and South America. And I've written a rock climbing guidebook that's actually now out of print. When it was time to update it, I was totally immersed in writing a 4-book fantasy series called A Bright One Chronicles, which is set in a desert world that has been greatly influenced by my travels. The first 2 books of the series came out last year. It's low fantasy. That means there's no elves or magic. There has the same laws of physics that we have here on Earth, but there can be miraculous events. And I'm supposed to read the back cover right now, and I better grab a back cover so I can read it. So it says, a girl. I do it over here on my phone. A girl of prophecy on a black stallion, a boy falconer, and a barbarian prince share destinies with a deadly female warrior mystic, but not happily ever after. After the fall of the glorious matriarchal Ambry Empire, an infant girl named Time mysteriously appears in the stables of a magnificent borderland castle, which is now part of a barbarian kingdom. She learns to ride Spike, a notorious mountain ibex, is taught the sword by this castle champion, and spiritually mentored by a fearless old herb woman. Time also befriends Jig, a young boy falconer who climbs the broken remains of the highest castle tower to capture, raise, and train a gyrfalcon chick. And she meets Crown Prince Epoko, a kind and introspective friend who may become something more. All the while, political factions search for the girl of prophecy heralding the return of the Ambry Empire, while others believe she is the divine daughter whose rise to power will bring a new world order. So, the first book in the series is really an origin story about the characters growing up. I've always been interested in the things that happen to a young person when they are smaller. That really helps them become exceptional people as they grow older. And all the plants and the animals are based in real life. Mountain ibexes have curved horns. They can be about 4 feet long, big, huge, curved like that. So in my book, they cut the horns off so they can ride the ibex. So book 2, Death of Innocence. Our hero Time is now becoming a teenager. She meets Weir War, who is a circus star who becomes her new friend and mentor in sword juggling, knife throwing, court etiquette, and dance. And a number of events occur at the very end of book 1 and also throughout book 2 that give book 2 the ominous title, Death of Innocence. So book 3 is called The Way of the World. That's coming out about a week. So Time is older now. She's left Dare Castle for reasons I can't reveal, give things away. She's in the artistic party and gambling town of Carver, where much of book 3 is set. And Time is having a run-in with a vicious gang leader, and she's beating on him with an old, dull sword. She doesn't want to kill him, she just wants to teach him a lesson. And the final book, a bright one, is coming out this November. The artwork for that cover is actually not quite finished yet, but I decided it's close enough for a sneak preview. Time has her flaming sword and her crystal shield. And this is also a statue of Time right behind here. Throughout the series, there's reasons for everything that happens, and including the reason that's set in the desert world. Something occurs in book 3 that would not work otherwise. And because it is a desert world, for the program today, we're going to focus on our travels in deserts. We've traveled across the Sahara, the Kalahari, the Gobi deserts, and along with a few other places of cultural interest that affected my writing. So I'm also going to explain kind of a little bit about how we started traveling and making our living giving slide programs. So a writer's life of adventure, fact and fiction, shows how our travels have influenced my writing and also our beliefs in spirituality. So when I was really little, my mother never read to me children's books. Instead, I remember sitting on the couch with my mom, and she always read to me the photo captions from National Geographic magazines. And I remember her saying, "Wouldn't it be fun to go to all those places?" So I was soon an avid reader. The most impactful books and memorable books from my youth were The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And also the autobiography of a yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. I joined the Self-Realization Fellowship when I was 16 and I started doing yoga. I received weekly lessons, study lessons for 2 years. That led me into Buddhism, then into Tibetan Buddhism, and then into Zen, which led me to reading books by Catholic monks explaining Zen, and then all the way back to about Christianity about 9 years later. So, after graduating from high school, I worked in Wyoming in the oil fields as a roughneck, and also as a roustabout building coal silos in Montana to save money to go on my first big trip across Africa with my sister. Here I am at age 19 in the Sahara Desert. I'm not smiling because there's flies crawling all around my mouth, and you smile and they go in your mouth trying to get the moisture. So we joined a 3-month overland expedition across northern, central, and eastern Africa, and we spent 3 weeks of that trip crossing the Sahara Desert. In southern Algeria, we met Tuaregs, the famous blue men of the desert, and they carried big curved knives on their chests, and their knowledge and understanding of the desert really inspired the grubbers and the hool culture that are in my fantasy series. We hired a Tuareg guide to take us across a section of desert that was normally only used by camel caravans. His name was Khalifa, and he's wearing a sword. See his sword right there, and he had never ridden in a vehicle in his life. And so he's in our truck, and we're going out across the desert. This is what the normal road looks like, but we're going to take an adventure, and we're heading across a featureless desert. We would drive out, and Khalifa, when he tried to decide where we're going to go next, we'd stop, he'd get out of the truck, and then we had to drive the truck quite a ways away. He didn't want anything that was metal next to him. And then he would smell the sand, and he'd walk around for a little bit, and then he'd wave to us, and we'd drive back to him, and he would go like this. And then that was the direction that we would go. And after 3 days, he led us to a small well that was simply a hole in the ground with a wooden cover over the top. There was no features at all. The water in the well was the color of coffee and cream. and it was filled with camel turds. So we strained out the turds with cheesecloth, we boiled the water, added in some iodine, and drank it. We went through 3 radiators crossing the desert. This one is so small it's at an angle to fit into the brackets, and you can see we took the mud flaps off the rear tires, and we added in some cardboard as well, trying to make scoops to get more air to go through the radiator, keep it from overheating. We were each allowed 1 inch of water in a small plastic basin each day for bathing and washing up, and we would save all that dirty water along with our dishwater and all of our urine in these containers, and then we would pour that into our leaking radiator, and you can imagine what that smelled like every time it boiled over. So my sister and I both have gotten immediate dysentery, and we're getting better actually. As this picture was taken, we're feeling a little better now. And our job on this particular day was to be the ones to go get water, to fill up all the water containers. And we're in a town where all the wells in the town were dry, and the only water available was at this army outpost, and you can see it just dripping out of that spigot. That was the only water. And it took us about half an hour to fill up each one of these containers, so we spent like the whole afternoon here sitting in the sun getting water. So we finally made it across the desert, and I survived a great adventure. But it was not something I thought I would ever do again. I was not used to the brutal heat. Well, I thought once was enough for me. I didn't think there would ever be another big desert crossing in my future. And I should mention just real quick, we did make it across Africa. We slowly crossed Central Africa in the rainy season, about 30 miles a day. By the time we arrived in Tanzania and Kenya and East Africa, I knew that I wanted to continue traveling and exploring the world. And this is a loo stop or a bathroom break. All the women are actually over here squatting and peeing. I made wonderful friends on the trip, but I knew that I was done traveling in a group, and I was ready and now confident to travel on my own. So my other passion in life at this time was skiing. I'd been in a ski patrol at Terry Peak, and now after another 6 months of working in the oil fields, I'd saved up enough money to be a ski bum in Jackson, Wyoming.
Bruce and I met in Jackson. I'd been living there for a couple of years, also as a ski bum. I had traveled the previous winter for 6 months in South America with a woman friend. We were studying birds, and I was learning to be a photographer. This is the very first photo I ever took of another person. We hitchhiked around Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru for 6 months. We each had $600. A highlight was hiking 26 miles with a hand-drawn map to the ruins of Machu Picchu. This is me on my 24th birthday. Many of the passes that we crossed were at 14,000 feet, so we were chewing coca leaves to help acclimatize, just like the local Incas. We had the ruins all to ourselves, so we camped several days in one of the old buildings. Today, over 2,500 people visit Machu Picchu.
Each day.
Each day. Now, back in Jackson, after a whirlwind 1-week courtship, I moved into Bruce's winterized teepee, which had a wood-burning stove. We both had been planning and saving our money to go to Mexico and Guatemala, so it seemed like destiny that we should go together.
We were excellent traveling companions right from the start. We had the same goals and enthusiasm for adventure. Our first trip lasted 6 months, and we spent just $100 each per month. We ate rice, beans, and fruit. We never once bought a cold soda or a beer. We slept in our hammocks. One of the goals of the trip was to study Maya ruins and visit all the archaeological sites, or as many sites as we could. This is Chichen Itza in southern Mexico in the Yucatan. This is before archaeologists restored the backside of the pyramid. You can see what it was like right when they cut down the trees and the brush and cleaned everything away. This was the first non-European civilization that I had ever studied, and it really had a great impact on me. We have returned to this area more than a dozen times. The Maya had an elaborate and very accurate calendar system which helped inspire the lunar calendar that I use in my fantasy books. In my books, each of the 4 weeks of the month has a name corresponding to the phase of the moon. I wrote about that trip and 6 other journeys through Mexico, Central, and South America in my book, Andes to the Amazon.
In In 1984, we quit our jobs, took our life savings, and set off on a 14,000-mile bicycle trip around the world. We started out in Spearfish and bicycled to the desert Southwest to explore and camp in the national parks in Utah and Arizona. We fell in love with this area, and we've been going back nearly every year for the last 34 years. The slot canyons there inspired the maze in Bruce's fantasy books. We bicycled for 3 months through Australia on many not-so-great roads, and we spent weeks in the desert outback. We cycled from Alice Springs to Uluru, which used to be called Ayers Rock, excuse me. But even more important than the desert experiences on this trip was our immersion into the local cultures, which greatly influenced Bruce's writing. On the island of Fiji, we stayed with a family of 14 people that lived in a 2-room house. They were braiding ribbons and coconut oil into my hair to celebrate my birthday. Then they dressed me in the mother's red silk wedding sari. What a great birthday. In a Hmong village in northern Thailand, women wear large black buns of hair. When I was showing interest in their clothing, the women ran through the village to find clothing they could lend to me. They didn't have a blonde wig, so they put a black wig in my hair. The clothes were hand embroidered, the beads made of stone, and the necklace is solid silver. Bruce thought this looked like so much fun that they got him dressed up as well. He's a little taller than the guy he borrowed the clothes from. His t-shirt isn't supposed to be sticking out right there. His shirt's actually supposed to be way down there.
In Bali, Indonesia, people make small offerings, daily offerings from palm fronds. They're made of flowers. And as a thanks for the gift of life, you see them everywhere. We were in Bali during a month-long celebration that has only occurred once in the last 100 years. The celebrations were all timed on lunar calendar dates, and I learned then that religious festivals in Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and even Easter celebrations in Christianity are all based on the lunar calendar. This is another reason I wanted a lunar calendar in my books. Even though our beliefs were very different, we found inspiration experiencing ceremonies that are held sacred by people all around the world. We try to visit the spiritual sites of each country. Thailand has amazing ornate temples, and we were impressed by the number of people who did daily devotions. In Thailand, we were invited to live underneath this statue of Buddha for 3 days with a locally famous monk. Each morning we would go with him on his alm rounds or his begging rounds, and people would put food into his bowl, especially tasty treats. We kept separated in these little containers that I am carrying. At a different monastery, we took a 10-day vow of silence. Ajahn Po was one of our teachers. He's doing a standing meditation. We were given a gunny sack, a little pillow, and a little wooden bench to sit on. They woke us up at 4:30 every morning. We only ate 2 meals a day. The rest of the time we either did a sitting or a standing meditation. I devoted a chapter of my book, The Road to Dreams, about the experience, and it also influenced my fantasy series.
In India, we cycled 3 months up into the Himalaya mountains and visited the headwaters of the sacred Ganges River. Hindus from all over India come on pilgrimage to Badrinath, which is located at 11,000 feet in elevation. We slept on the floor of an ashram guest house for religious pilgrims. The Hindus come here to bathe in the water and be cleansed of their sins. For many, this is a fulfillment of a lifelong dream. The joy and happiness were contagious.
A small part of northern India is on the Tibetan Plateau, and the irrigation in this high desert valley at 11,500 feet inspired the fields that are around Dare Castle in my book. The surrounding mountains and valleys all have numerous Buddhist monasteries with prayer flags. We went on a monastery binge. We hiked to visit a number of them. We watched ceremonies, listened to the monks chanting. One of our favorite hangouts was Spitak Monastery, where a group of monks we're creating a mandala. It's a highly symbolic religious artwork made from colored sand funneled through metal tubes. And they have little vibrations as they rub these little ridges here, and that makes just a little bit of the sand comes out at the end to make exacting patterns. We delayed leaving this area for 3 weeks in order to attend an unexpected festival celebrating the release of a holy man who had been held captive in China for decades. Monks from all across the mountains of Ladakh came to take part in a 3-day celebration. He's spinning a big prayer wheel. Love his glasses. The streets were lined with people hoping for a glimpse of the Rinpoche, the holy man. Tibetan Buddhism is unique in Buddhism with beliefs in a variety of spirits and supernatural beings that represent different aspects of God and creation. The Tibetan Book of the Dead gives instructions for spirits traveling between incarnations in areas where there are both peaceful and wrathful deities. Aspects of this idea helped me create the prayers for the dead in my fantasy books. The prayers of the dead were also inspired by the biblical story in Genesis of Jacob dreaming of a ladder in heaven with angels going up and down through the different layers of heaven.
After 26 months, we returned home and began doing educational slideshows of our trip in schools.
I also wrote my first book, The Road of Dreams, about the trip. It took me 5 years to write the book, which was twice as long as the journey itself.
When Bruce finished the book, we next cycled from Costa Rica through Central America to Mexico. A couple years later, we bicycled in Ecuador and Peru and took canoes out into the Amazon rainforest. In 1999, we bicycled across southern Africa for 4 months. This was our first major desert trip. We are going to bicycle across the Kalahari Desert during the cool season. Each night we just push our bikes off the road and camp in the bush. We loved all the strange trees and the desert plants, like the baobab tree, which can live up to 3,000 years. All of the desert plants, trees, and cactus in Bruce's fantasy books are actual trees and plants, many from Africa. This is the kookaburn, which is a type of aloe with medicinal and healing properties in the leaves. Many of you, if you have aloe plant, probably just have the leaves right there. Surprisingly, I was actually as interested in seeing the unique plants from southern Africa as I was about seeing the animals. There were more than 150 different types of aloe and many strange succulents that are only found in this part of the world.
There were small towns along the road where we could stop each day and get food and water. We always quickly drew a big crowd of friendly locals wherever we stopped. You know, I look close and you see Tass right there. We left the main highway to cycle out onto the Magadagati Pan, which is an enormous lake bed that has been dry for over 10,000 years. During the cool season, the daytime temperature out here is about 80 degrees. In Book 2 of A Bright One Chronicles, the grubbers have to cross a similar pan called the Lake of Shimmering Heat in the full summer. By sunset, it was growing cold, and it froze each night. Everyone here has adapted amazingly to the desert environment. Oh, okay. But there are certain groups of people who are even more at home in the desert. One of those groups is the Sand People, or the Bushmen, who we met in South Africa and also in Namibia.
And I should say, they're some of the smallest people in the world. Most of the women are about this tall, and their thighs are their waist is about as big as one of my thighs.
They are really small. They carry water across the desert and also bury water for later in ostrich egg canteens. The Himba, like the Bushmen, don't wear much clothing. Should we just wait for a sec? Like the Bushmen, the Himba don't wear much clothing. I did not replicate their culture in my fantasy book, but I was greatly influenced by their ability, little things that they do to adapt to the desert. The women make a red paste out of ochre and butterfat to cover their bodies and protect their skin from insects and also from the sun. They also braid that paste into their hair. The women were very self-assured and proud of their culture, which were traits that I wanted the women in my books to possess. At one of the villages, the kids had never seen a bicycle, so I gave each one of them a ride. It was a wonderful day I don't think any of us will ever forget.
In 2004, we made a program on Islamic culture and ancient civilizations by bicycling through Egypt, Jordan, Greece, and Turkey. This was 3 years after 9/11. The guard watches our bikes while we go inside a pyramid in Egypt. Now, our original plan was to bicycle from Cairo to Luxor along the Nile Valley, but the Egyptian government was hyper worried about terrorism, so foreigners had to travel in a government-approved tourist convoy. We have an alternative plan. We want to take a seldom used route from Cairo to Luxor through the Great Western Desert, which is a part of the Sahara. Because tourists rarely go this way, the police have not been told to stop us. We wear long sleeve shirts and big hats to protect us from the scorching sun. This pink bag is filled with 5 gallons of water, which weighs 40 pounds. That's enough for the 2 of us for 24 hours. Here the temperature is 112 degrees, so we stop about every half hour to put water on the front of our shirts and on the scarves around our necks.
They're not bothering me.
Occasionally there were police checkpoints. Tass snuck this picture as no photos of the police were allowed. The police are all off to the side in a building. But we were always happy to see them because they were super friendly. They'd fill up our water and they give us tea and sweetbreads. They couldn't believe we're out here bicycling across the desert. I'm using my Arabic phrase book to translate this sign. This is the trip that really most influenced my writing about deserts in my fantasy books. There are 4 oases that we want to explore on our route across the desert. The largest oasis, Karga, is over 60 miles long. The Quran teaches that Muslims should be kind to strangers, so people were constantly inviting us into their homes. We were happy to see that Muslim hospitality had not changed with 9/11. Between the oases, about every 100 kilometers or 60 miles, there's supposed to be a concrete awning like this for afternoon shade. Right now it's 11 o'clock in the morning and it's only 104 degrees. And we want to ride for another 2 or 3 hours. So the big question, do we risk leaving? What if there's no more shade? So we have a thermometer in our compass to check the temperature while riding. Now it's 1 o'clock and it's 116 degrees and we need to find shade. A half hour later, we spot this little place. The ground is so hot we have to lie on our sleeping pads. In the sun, it's over 120 degrees. Even in the shade, it's 108. In the Bright One Chronicles, my fantasy book, this part of the day is called the heat, when everyone has to be out of the sun. Then after the heat, we would resume riding at about 6 o'clock in the evening, and we'd ride each evening.
Appreciate and learn about the Bedouins and their camels. Emir was a great guide and cook. He made delicious flatbread.
And yes, there is a camel guide in book 3 of my fantasy series, and his name is Emir. Emir loved listening to my iPod, which he had never seen before. Before our trip, I downloaded a whole bunch of Arabic music, and Emir was very impressed by my selection. Between our big bike trips, we take frequent smaller adventures. These limestone walls around El Potrero Chico in Mexico are the inspiration for the cliffs surrounding Dare Castle in my fantasy books. This is where Time, our hero, rides Spike, the mountain ibex, into the mountains. The walls are covered with cactus and even palm trees.
We came here to celebrate my 50th birthday. We came to rock climb for 3 weeks and explore the countryside. When you look on the wall next to me, you can see all these cactus just growing out of these steep limestone walls. There were also agaves growing out of the different pockets.
In my fantasy book, there's a young boy named Jig who's a falconer and also a rock climber. And our climbs in Devil's Tower inspired my description of Jig. He has to climb the burnout inside of the highest castle, the Dare Castle, during the first book. And during the climb, Jig has to stem, like I'm doing here, where I'm pushing with my feet out to hold on as I climb El Matador on the steep west face of Devil's Tower for my 50th birthday. Back to Mexico, the silver mining town of Guanajuato with houses stacked on top of each other. This is the silver mining town of Taxco, also built on steep hillsides. This was the inspiration for the artistic party and gambling town of Carver, which is central to book 3 in my series.
If any of you have silver jewelry from Mexico, that's probably where it came from.
The houses in Carver are all brightly painted like this town in the Gulf of Mexico near Veracruz.
Chalcoltolpan is the most brightly painted houses in Mexico, and because of that, it's on the World Heritage Site. We were there almost a week and we never saw a single tourist. But imagine living in a place like this. Everybody paints their house a different color, and they butt right up next to each other.
Cenotes in the Yucatan Peninsula are depressions in limestone in the lowlands that stay filled with water even through the dry season. And I have similar cenotes in the hollow hills of my fantasy books. Some are inside caverns with small openings on top. The cenotes provided water for the Maya during the dry season, and these are those are all tree roots you can see coming down into the water. If I just do that.
In 2011, we bicycled 4 months across China and also made a documentary film about the trip. That was our first and definitely our last documentary film. We spent 3 weeks of the trip bicycling in the Gobi Desert. Our final destination in the Gobi is the Singing Sand Dune Mountains. At the bottom were hundreds of Chinese tourists riding camels. We wanted a little more isolated experience, so we're going to climb the highest dune in the background. As the hot wind blows across the sand, the dunes, it creates a humming noise, and that's how they received their name. At the top, we have spectacular views of Crescent Springs Oasis. China has 56 different ethnic groups. We really enjoyed the variety of culture, the clothing, the hairstyles, the jewelry. These women belong to the ethnic group called the Yao. They are also sometimes referred to as the long hairs. They were happy to undo their hair, show me how long they were, and then how quickly they could tie them back up onto their heads. Women in the Yi ethnic group wear huge black hats, almost like umbrellas. They wear brightly colored blouses and skirts. During a festival, a Tibetan woman wears rare coral beads braided into her hair. This is where my necklace came from. It's got turquoise, coral, and amber. Thank you. I couldn't see what was on there. I forgot.
My fantasy books have a matriarchal culture, so I was especially interested in the Nashi, which have a matrilineal society where women, not men, sit around and play cards all day. Nashi women inherit property, and all arguments are settled by a group of older women. Nouns in the Nashi language strengthen their meaning when the word for female is added. The word for male decreases the meaning. For example, stone plus female equals boulder, but stone plus male equals pebble. In my fantasy books, I wanted to capture how towns in hot climates that seem deserted during the day come alive at night when the temperature cools. And we really saw this out, especially near the Gobi Desert. As the sun sets, food vendors set up on the empty streets soon begin to fill as people come out to eat and to socialize. Tass is enjoying some spicy fried squid. This is the inspiration for the monthly moon festivals in the Bright One Chronicles, which I thought would be even more important for people who did not have electricity. In my fantasy books, I also wanted to incorporate a spirituality that brings together aspects of different world religions. And this is a giant prayer wheel that I'm helping to turn. When people read my books, they sometimes ask if I have a spiritual practice. Yes, I started meditating, as I said earlier, when I was 16, started yoga, continued to do so daily. By the way, I placed Joshua trees are all around Dare Castle in my book, but in the book, instead of calling them Joshua trees, I thought that was too lame. I called them shaggy yucca trees. So Tass and I both do about 20 minutes of yoga each morning, and we prefer to do it outside whenever possible, especially on our front patio, which is out of the wind and gets great early morning sun. I was inspired on our around-the-world bike trip by the Buddhists in Asia who had altars in their homes, and I have an altar in our spare bedroom with sacred items and prayer beads from different world religions. So now I'm back just a little bit about my writing history. I wrote the nonfiction books about our travels, and then I started writing a fantasy novel, my first fantasy fiction, in the 1980s, and I even brought a typewriter in my backpack on our third trip to Mexico, to the Yucatan, but I could never figure out the ending of the book. 30 years later, as I was writing a Bright One Chronicles, I realized that the idea from that very first book could be adapted into a section of book 3 in my fantasy series. So for my writing habits, I'm always just driven to write. When I have a big project, I get tunnel vision, and I only want to focus on my project, and I'm a terrible multitasker. I don't do office work, I never check emails, it can take me days to answer a text. The only thing I want to do is work on my book. So luckily, Tass is our office manager who keeps things.
That is lucky.
That is very lucky. So if I have a productive day writing, then I don't want to take any time off the next day because I feel like I'm on a roll. And if I have a bad day and only write a few paragraphs, well then I'm obsessed. I can't take any time off the next day because I need to feel like I need to break through my writer's block. So I do have an office helper. His name is Meow. I used to write about 8, 10, and sometimes even 12 hours a day, and I've managed to calm myself down, especially during COVID. And now I usually write only about 4 to 5 hours a day, about 6 days a week. So this is Meow helping me with my maps. Meow helping me with my mouse. I also have another even more important helper, Tass, who has been she is a voracious reader, and she's my priceless editor. When I say priceless, what that means is she's invaluable, but she never gets paid. So she's priceless.
At the start of our round-the-world bike trip, we house sat for a friend in Hawaii that was within biking distance of the main Honolulu Library with its huge selection of South Pacific books where we were heading on our trip. So this was our reading, our required reading for the next month. I'm always reading. Here I'm reading at night in our tent as we were cycling across Africa in Botswana. I actually carried Nelson Mandela's 1,000-page autobiography on my bike across the Kalahari Desert. It was as thick as a phone book.
So we camp, mountain bike, and rock climb each fall in Moab, Utah. Tass may look mellow, but she's as tough as nails. And when I was first starting to write my fantasy book, I had about 50 pages done, and I was ready for someone to read those first 50 pages, and I told her, it's just the start, but just I kind of want to give it a feel. What do you think? So she hands it back to me, and it looks like, if you got a D on a test, your teacher, how much red they had scratched out and all this stuff. And I said, great, that's all perfect. I can fix all that. Yeah, good. But what I want to know is, what did you think of the book itself? Not just worry about the English the proper English. And so She goes, well, I don't know. And I go, no, tell me, really, what did you think about it? She goes, well, I thought it would be better. So after my initial devastation, I said, well, tell me what to do to make it better. So she gave me a list of things, and I did all those things, and gave it back to her, and she said, yeah, that's better. So really, that's wonderful. I wanted to include Tass in this is the photos that I send out for our author bio with Tass. I wanted to include her in the author bio because she really is an excellent editor, and that means she's someone who's brutally honest, gives me challenging critiques throughout the entire process to help make the story better. Which brings me to my map, which I drew in pencil and then hired an artist to redo and professionalize. I found my artist on the website guru.com, where you can find illustrators, editors, and proofreaders for hire. My artist, his name is Atula Suriwande. He's from Sri Lanka, which is an island right off the coast of India. You can see some of his work right here. And you can also see a picture he drew of himself right down there. For the first book cover, he wanted a brief overview of what happened in the book, and he also wanted to know my thoughts on the cover, of which I had very specific ideas. I told him about mountain ibexes, and I said I wanted a mountain ibex on the cover, and I sent him pictures off the internet. These are mountain ibexes that are grazing for lichens on the side of a dam in Europe. Mountain ibexes have soft hooves for traction, and they eat lichens and moss, and that's some pretty amazing rock climbing abilities right there. So I found this photo also on the internet. It was a position that I wanted Spike to have on the cover, and you can see how it would be a problem riding a mountain ibex if you didn't cut off their horns, because they'll continue to grow until they curve away around like this. So that's why the horns are cut short in my book. It took about 50 emails back and forth to get this pencil drawing of the cover perfected, and another 50 emails to dial in everything else with the right clothes and the right colors for time and for the cover. When I saw the final cover and how long it took, I gave Atula a big tip. So my life experiences, you can see, really permeate these books and give them a gritty realism. They were a blast to write, and they're even more fun now after 20 years of work. I can talk about them and finally share the story with others. I have some copies available that I'd be glad to autograph. You can also buy them at Mitzi's Books here in Rapid, and they're available on Amazon. Print books are just $9.99. That's what I sell them for as well. Kindle versions is just $3.99. And an interesting twist to my contract with Amazon, if you buy the Kindle version of my book, I don't get a royalty payment unless you read the entire book. Now, if you only read half the book, I'll just get half a royalty payment. If you buy the book and don't read it for 2 years and then you read it, in 2 years, I'll get the royalty payment. So it's like, that's one of the reasons Jeff Bezos can try to fly to the moon, because he's picking up all the little extra money there that he's not sharing with the people that are writing the books. But I want to thank you for coming, and whoops, there we go. And I think Darla has a few questions she'd like to ask us. What's that?
And you can just turn
Oh, yes, I just say real quick here. Oh, one last thing, Tass said, you didn't say last something, and that is, if you do buy the book, please read it and consider giving me a review. So there you go. Thank you. Now it's Darla's turn.
Okay, all right. Well, let's hear it for him.
Sure. Yeah, but camera, can you for the audience? Yes, she doesn't mind.
We have an audience.
We have an audience. You have your phone?
Of course.
Okay.
Can you take a picture? Or make a picture too?
Well, that was fabulous. These guys are so pro. They told me it'd be about 50 minutes exactly, so that was great. I do have a few questions.
Yes.
Yeah, just the audience.
Okay.
So we can prove to the NEA we had some people. That's the National Endowment for the Arts. We got some funding
All right,
from them
Darla, you go
too.
sit in the audience too. Give us one more.
Okay,
Okay, good idea.
Look good, everybody. You never know where this is going to end up. There we go. All right, here we go. Great.
Thank you.
Every last person.
I know.
Well, we do have people that do stream this series, so that's actually pretty good. So I was writing a few notes while you guys were talking. In the desert, your first adventure there, Bruce, you said no more group travel. Why was that? I mean, what did you not like about it?
Well, first of all, our group is really good.
Can you talk in the microphone?
Sure.
Oh, just like, sorry. Here, let's just take it off to get it.
Yeah.
Our group was actually, here we go. Our group was actually really good, and I made some lifelong friends. But there are aspects of being with a large group, you know, you don't have that spontaneity. If someone would stop to invite us into their home, then all of a sudden there's 18 of us in their house. And then we also met another group that was traveling north by the same company, and their group was totally dysfunctional. And I realized how lucky I was that I was in the group that I was in. Whereas this other group, there were people that were talking to each other. They're on a 13-week expedition across Africa, and there's people not talking to each other in the group. And so I just kind of really realized that I wanted to travel on my own. I wanted to have that freedom to go wherever I wanted to, you know, in the mornings, leave what time I wanted, to stop if there's something in the middle of the day I wanted to see, and just to have that freedom.
How about you, Tass? So did you ever do any individual travel or travel with groups?
I'd only ever traveled individually, but I would say another reason we love traveling, just the two of us on bicycles, is because we're very approachable. So we meet people so easily, whereas when you think here in town, if you see a big tour bus, I don't know how many of you would just feel comfortable going up and starting to talk to them. Probably not. They've got a pretty strict agenda what they're doing. But when you see someone on a bicycle, that they're stopped, they seem approachable, and you will go up and talk to them. And we have that all around the world, that people would approach us because of that. And it's funny, when we were on the World Bike Tour, because a lot of people hadn't seen someone bike touring, especially white people or this kind of hair, they would always ask us if we were Olympians. And we'd say no, we tried to explain, and finally we realized we should just say yes, because otherwise it made no sense. We didn't fit anywhere, so yes, for the whole trip, we refer to ourselves as the Olympians.
Well, Tass, as long as you got the mic there, I'll ask this of both of you. Have you been back to Machu Picchu since you had that original experience?
No, because the first one was so magic. Like, literally, there was nobody there. We just put our tent up, there was a guard there, and so we just said, can we put up our tent here? He's like, sure. So then we just hiked around the ruins and hiked up Machu Picchu a couple times.
Let me say something to you about that. When we went to South America together, we talked about whether we should go to Machu Picchu, and it was the dry season. And Tass had these beautiful pictures of Machu Picchu all green. And I thought, I don't want to go there in the dry season. This is not going to be very good for photos. We'll come back to Machu Picchu later. Well, another trip, we'll do that. And now we're like, what was I thinking? You know, it's like, I don't know. Maybe next time I'm going to get back to Ecuador or Peru, I mean. So it's I missed the boat a little bit on that one.
Well, I'm sure it's fabulous. I've never been.
One funny little story, when I came back from South America, I had a little slide. I only brought, I think, 6 rolls of film with me. Well, now I thought that seemed like a lot because I was just learning. My boyfriend at the time was a photojournalist, and he couldn't believe I wasn't going to bring a camera, so he lent me one of his old cameras and kind of taught me how to make photos. So I took about 6 pictures. So Machu Picchu, I have probably 2 more pictures of it, that's all. So anyway, I did a slideshow for my family, and my grandpa's sitting in the back, and when the picture came up of me with the coca leaves, he goes, is that a young Inca boy? No, Grandpa, it's me.
I know I've seen you guys present a lot, but I was surprised with your experience with the Muslim culture, especially 3 years after 9/11, and I also remember you saying that the people there that you interacted with wondered why there weren't more tourists.
Yes, and they also, a number of them also said that we were the first Americans that they'd ever met. And we have so many misconceptions about them. We thought it was just important for us to be there learning about them and also giving them a chance to learn about us. And we, you know, because they had a lot of misconceptions about what Americans believe, what Americans were interested in. So travel is a great two-way street.
And I just thought of something, whenever we travel, we always bring postcards of the Black Hills or pictures of our family, and those are great. Even if we speak different languages, they're great icebreakers. And when we show pictures of the Black Hills, people always are amazed. They keep saying, this is in the United States, this is in the United States, that they think we're all high-rise and all that. And we have a picture of Mount Rushmore with, is it Ben Blackhawk in the front with his full regalia on? Not one person in all our years of traveling has ever asked anything about Mount Rushmore, but they want to know all about his regalia. What kind of bird feathers those are, about the beads, because it's a full body shot, which just cracks me up every time. But that's what people
That's
want to
cool.
talk about.
This is America? Yes.
Yeah.
That's America.
That's a real American.
That's
Anyway, I have other questions, but I want to open it up to the audience here to see what kind of things you'd like to know, and I will repeat them because we're being streamed. Go ahead here, Todd.
Bruce, looking at the four covers of the books, they seem to start out simple and get more complicated as they go along. I assume that's intentional.
Wait a minute, Bruce. We just had a question from the audience of looking at your fantasy books. They start out with covers that are more simple, that get more complicated as the series goes on. And is that intentional on your part, or did you just get more of a vision of what you wanted?
That's a little of both. The first cover I wanted kind of simple, and it was hard for me to decide. There was a number of things that happened in the first book that I thought would make a good cover. And one of the things that I really wanted, there is an innocence to the first book, and that cover that I chose, how it kind of shows that a little bit. The young girl growing up, she has some exciting adventures, but everything, there's still that simpleness to it. And as the story evolves, she grows older and things become a lot more complex. There's a lot bigger issues that come in. So I did want a little bit more drama in the later covers. If I look back at it now, the only thing that I'm a little uncomfortable with that I chose on the first cover is that for some people, when they look at the first cover, they automatically think, well, this is a book that's written for really young people, young adults, and they kind of miss that it's really for adults as well. And part of me thinks, well, I wonder if I should have had a cover that was a little more gritty for the first one. But that's just kind of the way it ended up being. And I personally love the first cover just because I think it really captures something about time at that age in her life, where she's fearless, she's riding this mountain ibex up cliffs and down cliffs, but yet at the same time, there's an innocence about her life at that time. So that's kind of how it came out.
We have another question over here.
How old is the girl in your first book?
In the very first book,
Hold on, Bruce. How old is the girl in your first book?
the first book starts with her appearing in these stables of a barbarian castle. And when she first appears in the stables, they think she's just like a couple of years old, but she grows really fast, and all of a sudden she's looks a little older, and by the end of the book she's just becoming a teenager. She's actually 12 at the end of the first book. In the second book she's kind of a young teenager, she's going, and by the third book she's in the late teens, and by the last book she's kind of early 20s.
Okay, we've got another question right here.
That documentary you guys made, is that on YouTube or somewhere?
Question here was if they could see the documentary on YouTube.
It was actually it was streamed on the Black Hills Film Festival just this winter, but it's not on YouTube. And we've been thinking about whether or not we want to stick it on there. There's been a couple of things with propriety aspects about it that we've kind of been holding back, but I'm really thinking more and more that I might. We do have some copies of it for sale for just $10, but I didn't bring any tonight, so I forgot that.
Is that the one that Drew
But
did?
they're on our website. You can order it off of our website.
Did Drew do the music for that one?
Yes. Yeah, but I wanted to do the music myself as far as arrange it, and so Darla's son, was it your son-in-law? Son.
My son.
Your son, Drew, made all these great rhythms that fit so much for the book. So he did for the movie. So he did all these drum rhythms, and then he did rhythms with guitars, and he did rhythms with a whole bunch of different instruments, and he showed me how I could loop it, so then I could decide, how long I wanted different things to last, and go with something that was happening in the movie, and I could also just kind of cut it down myself. So it was spectacular, the job he did, because the music fit so well with it, and it was really cool. So I was very, very happy about the way that worked out.
He was too, because he really is a big fan. So as my son, he writes music for movies and TV and stuff. We got a question right out there.
Yes, my sister was in Egypt, and she wrote the camels, a pennant, you know, that she brought back from Egypt.
Yeah, well, I couldn't, her sister was what? I didn't really make.
She went to Egypt, rode some camels and got a pennant. Is it a camel pennant?
My sister rode a camel.
Yeah, oh cool.
And then she brought back a pennant from Egypt that I put on the chain around my neck.
I should mention that tourists have been going to Egypt since the days of the Roman Empire. There were tourists going to Egypt, so for thousands of years. So you can imagine they have this huge tourist industry and history of tourism. And the people in Egypt are so remarkable. If you're walking down the street and someone will come up to you and they'll start talking to you in English and they'll ask if you want this or you want that. And if you just play a little game with them and just don't say anything, then they'll say the same thing and they'll say, ask in French. If you don't say anything, then they'll ask you in German. And then if you don't do that, then maybe they'll go to Italian or Russian or who knows what. But it's like almost everybody can speak 6 or 7 languages. It's, you know, everybody in the tourist industry, because that's how they make their living. If they can't talk to people, there's no way they can do business. So it is really remarkable. And you quickly learn too that they're so helpful that if you get someone that knows the local area, they'll take you all around, dirt cheap, they'll show you all sorts of stuff you wouldn't be able to find on your own. And so it's really a wonderful place to travel because of that. The Egyptians, I think, are some of the friendliest people in the world. They really are wonderful.
Are you treated the same in the marketplace, Tass?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and you'd found that mainly throughout the Middle East?
Pretty much, yeah. I love photographing patterns of food, the way it's displayed in the markets. And so I go in with my camera and I look at the vendors and show my camera. They'll give me a nod, and then what really happens is it turns into this big contest. Then all the other vendors keep going, well, come over here, take a picture of my vegetables. And so sometimes I'll kind of rearrange them a little bit. So it's just, I have a blast in there because everybody really gets into it. And now that I'm digital, which was the first time when we did our bike trip across China, I could actually show people the photos that I was making of their food, and they just were so proud and loved it. And they thought, oh, theirs was better than their neighbors. And
all the photos you made of them.
And, oh yeah, and I always make photos.
Yeah.
I always ask, and if I could make a photo, I've hardly ever had anybody say no.
Well, we have time for one more question. Is there another? Oh, CJ, you have a question?
So I'm something of a wannabe writer myself, and a lot of times I find it hard to find that courage to get going and start things. I just want to know about like your writing process, and especially when you were talking about writing as a younger man, what that was like.
Excuse